Once upon a time, in a very big city, lived a man who menstruated. His name was Okoye, and he was a tall and muscular fitness coach who was known for his booming voice and ego. Okoye believed that he was superior to all women. He said it openly as he downplayed the role of women in the home. If not for women's cooking and childbearing, what else are they good for? He'd laugh as he walked out with his friends at the gym. One of his friends, named Obioma, always rebuked him for this, saying that women were actually stronger than men. They bring life into the world after 9 long months, something that women cannot even think of doing. He said to Okoye, who replied him saying that all women were weaklings. They all pretend as if childbirth is a big deal. Is it not to carry a small baby for 9 months? How hard can it be? Do you know how many weights I lift in a day? He said to his friend Obioma, who shook his head in disappointment as he listened to Okoye mock his wife, his mother, and every woman who had ever bettered a child. Okoye had no regard for women. He returned home later that evening and met his wife in bed, crying from extreme pain. She was on her monthly period and her stomach ached like it was being ripped apart. Okoye looked down at her and called her a pretender. You women need to stop with all this pretense, he scoffed as he walked around the room angrily. Ordinary blood, and you're crying like someone stabbed with a knife. Come on, stand up and serve me my food, he said to his wife Nenye, who forced herself up, clutching her stomach as she winced in extreme pain. She walked into the kitchen and served his food, but Okoye was not willing to eat what she had prepared. He requested for something different, pounded yam and egusi soup to be precise, not caring that his wife was in extreme pain to prepare it. But your hands are not bleeding now, he snapped at Nenye, who stood in the kitchen trembling from a mix of pain and silent rage. She said nothing to him as she turned away quickly, hiding the tears that were now forming in her eyes. The cramps in her stomach tightened like a fist, but Nenye swallowed her pain. She brought out the mortar and pestle and began to pound the yam. For over 1 hour, the sound of pounding echoed through their compound as Nenye, pale and sweating, mashed the yam with shaking arms. Her entire body was soaked with sweat and her back throbbed, but still she pressed on. After pounding the yam, she prepared the egusi soup with the same quiet determination, ignoring the pain that was cutting through her abdomen like a knife. She finally served his food, but Okoye told her that he was no longer interested in the food. He requested for the food that she prepared earlier, the food that he once rejected, and Nenye stood there frozen as she stared at him in disbelief. The veins in her arm pulsed as sweat dripped down her face. Are you talking about the food I made earlier? She asked her husband, who looked up at her angrily, urging her to bring it back. I've changed my mind. I'm not in the mood for pounded yam anymore, he said to Nenye, who closed her eyes for a moment as she took a deep breath, clenching her fist in anger. She did not cry. She did not scream. She simply walked to her room and lay down in bed. At this point, Nenye could not bear the pain any longer. She hugged her pillow tightly, trying to seek relief, when her husband walked into the room and gave her a very hot slap. He pushed her out of his house into the rain, shutting the door behind him as he yelled angrily at her not to disturb his peace with her cries. Okoye had no regard for his wife. He did not care that she was in pain and that the rains were pouring hard from the sky. He sat on his favorite chair, sipping his wine as he devoured the food that she had prepared earlier. She wants to lie down like a queen when I haven't eaten. Nonsense, he muttered to himself as the rain intensified, sending lightning and thunder through his window. He struck the table in front of him, causing Okoye to jump up in shock. His wine glass shattered at his feet, spilling across the floor as he stared at the broken pieces in disbelief. He looked outside as the thunder continued to roar. Okoye could hear the rain lashing harder against the roof, and somewhere within the compound walls, he heard his wife's cry, intense and deep. Nenye was curled up in the corridor, her dress drenched as she fought the pain that was tearing through her womb. Her husband Okoye ignored her cries. He went to bed angrily, not caring that his wife was outside in the rain. At exactly 2 in the morning, Okoye woke up to a pain so sharp that he snatched the air from his lungs. He bolted upright, clutching his stomach as he twisted violently. A cold sweat broke across his body as he stumbled towards the bathroom, convinced something he ate was trying to kill him. But when he looked down, his shorts were soaked, not with sweat, with blood, bright red blood, flowing down his thighs. Okoye screamed. He tore off his shorts and stood frozen, watching the blood trail to the floor. No, no, this can't be, he whispered. This is a dream. Another cramp hit him, fiercer than the last. He collapsed to the tiles, groaning, crying, calling into himself like a child. He dragged himself to the bedroom, leaving a red trail behind. He grabbed his phone with shaking hands and tried to dial a friend, but the phone fell to the ground and broke. He yelled out in pain as he made his way to the door to find his wife. Okoye opened the door hoping to find Nenye there, but Nenye was nowhere to be found. The rain had stopped, but the wind carried a silence that pierced through his bones. Nenye! He shouted again and again, his voice echoing into the night as he staggered forward, one hand on the wall and the other clutched over his stomach. He stood there for some minutes, hoping that Nenye would hear his cry and return home, but no one came to his rescue. The sky remained dark. The street was empty. Not a soul was in sight. Not even a bird dared to break the silence. Only the sound of Okoye's heavy breathing, accompanied by his painful cries. Okoye could not bear the pain any longer. He passed out moments later on the living room floor and was awoken hours later by his wife Nenye, who returned to pack her belongings. Nenye caught sight of Okoye from a distance. She rushed to him and found him bleeding on the floor unconscious. Nenye rushed him to the hospital, believing that he was hurt. Little did she know that her husband was now seeing his own period. The doctors were all stunned to see a man pass blood like a woman. They ran test after test, checked for internal injuries, ulcers, or trauma, but none of the scans they did made sense. There was no cuts, no bruises, no ruptured organs, and yet the blood continued to flow. This is not possible, one doctor whispered, holding up Okoye's chart. There's no medical explanation for this, he said to the other doctors, who all looked confused to see a man in his period. Nenye could not understand how this had happened. She asked the doctors for a remedy, but none of the doctors were able to offer a clear answer. They prescribed painkillers, gave IV fluids, and tried to stabilize Okoye's vitals, but the source of the bleeding remained a mystery to them. One of the nurses, an older woman named Adora, pulled Nenye aside to talk to her. Her voice was low and steady, her eyes sharp with wisdom. This is not something science will explain, she said to Nenye, who she informed that her husband was under a curse. He has wronged so many women and needs to make amends, or else he will bleed for the rest of his life. Nenye was not shocked to hear this. Her husband was one to always have an opinion on things that had to do with women. In the past, he had called a random woman lazy and fat, stating that it was her laziness that kept her the way that she was, not caring that the woman recently underwent a surgery to birth her baby. Okoye even mocked his friend's wife for always rushing to the hospital whenever she had her period. She had an extremely painful condition that caused her to bleed heavily and collapse whenever she was seeing her period. But Okoye, with his usual ignorance, had laughed about it at the gym, calling her the queen of drama. She's just looking for attention, he said to his friends, who all looked at him like a fool. Now, the drama had come home to him as he lay there on his hospital bed, screaming out in complete agony. He screamed so loud that the nurses came running again, but there was nothing they could do to help. Every injection wore off quickly. Every painkiller was swallowed by a new wave of pain. Okoye bled through several pads, but still the doctors could not find a solution. They discharged him from the hospital, and his wife took him home like a helpless child. Walking was like a sport to him. as his waist burned in a way that he could not explain. Okoye, once the gym coach who boasted of his strength, could no longer lift himself out of bed. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he whimpered at the slightest wave of pain. Nenye watched in stunned silence as she cleaned the blood-stained sheets and changed his pads, the same way he had once mocked women for doing. Every time she pressed a hot towel to his stomach, he flinched and cried out like a wounded animal. For 1 week straight, Okoye bled day and night. He begged Nenye to help him get out of bed, and Nenye could not believe that the man who had once yelled at her and called her lazy was now begging for her help just to sit up. She remembered all the terrible things that he made her do when she was having cramps. She desperately wanted to exact revenge, but something deep and quiet in her heart refused to let her become him. Instead of revenge, Nenye chose restraint, not because she was weak, but because she had finally understood her power. She wiped his brow with a warm cloth, set a hot water bottle gently on his belly as she watched him cry and beg for it to stop. Later that evening, Okoye whimpered from beneath his blanket and called out in a voice so soft that it almost dissolved into the air. Nenye, please help me boil indomie. From the kitchen, Nenye paused mid-step. She returned to the doorway and raised one eyebrow. You mean the same indomie you once called lazy woman's food? She asked Okoye, who nodded with the enthusiasm of a dying man. Yes, but not just plain. Add egg, onions, maybe pepper, and some tiny sausages too. Please, and crack the egg halfway so it's not too soft or too hard. Nenye folded her arms and leaned against the doorpost. So you really want indomie? She asked her husband, who revealed that indomie was the only thing that he craved at the time. Nenye blinked at him, stunned by the irony. She could not believe that her husband, who criticized her for eating noodles during her period, was now craving the same noodles that he called a lazy woman's food. She stood there stunned, as her husband not only requested for the food to be made in a certain way, he also requested that it be served to him in bed. These were things that Okoye almost beat her up for in the past, and Nenya could not help but stand frozen. She burst into laughter, a full belly shaking laughter that echoed off the walls of the house. Nenye laughed so hard that she had to sit on the armchair to steady herself. Okoye lay there, too weak to defend himself, but he managed a crooked smile through the pain that he endured. As Nenye caught her breath, her laughter gave way to something gentler, something deeper. You made me pound yam from scratch while I was bleeding, dizzy and shaking. You called me lazy when I asked for help. I cleaned the house, cooked your food, did the laundry, all while feeling like someone was stabbing me from the inside. And now you're crying over noodles? Okoye looked down at his trembling hands, his eyes wet. I was a fool, he said quietly. I thought strength meant being louder, but this pain is louder than me. Nenye touched his forehead, then his cheeks, both hot with fever. Women live through this, she said softly, silently, monthly, and still go to work, cook, clean, raise children, and smile like nothing is wrong. She stood up and headed to the kitchen, as Okoye felt so terrible for the things that he had done to her. Weeks passed, but the bleeding did not stop. Okoye was now getting weak, and his wife was worried that the bleeding might end up killing him. She invited her pastor, who prayed for him, believing that it was a curse. The pastor, a gentle but firm man, stood at the foot of his bed as he prayed. After a long moment of silence, he opened his eyes and looked directly at Okoye. You must seek the forgiveness of all the women you wronged, or risk living your life like this forever, he said to Okoye, who did not know where to start. The pain did not even let him think clearly, talk more of remembering all the women that he had wronged. So, Okoye took a notebook and began to scribble down the names of the women who he could remember. He first apologized to his wife and sought her forgiveness for how terribly he treated her in the past, promising to change. Then, one after the other, Okoye paid a visit to their homes, pleading for forgiveness. He did this painstakingly, hoping that the bleeding would stop. But as the days went by, it did not stop, and this got Okoye worried as he feared for his dear life. His friend Obioma paid him a visit one evening after not seeing him at the gym for almost 2 weeks. He was so shocked to see Okoye in such a condition, and Okoye narrated the whole story to him. Obioma sat in stunned silence, the weight of Okoye's words settling deep in his chest. He looked at his once vibrant friend, now pale, trembling, wrapped in layers of cloth and pads like a sick child. After a long pause, Obioma leaned forward and asked him a question. Do you remember Chiamaka? He asked Okoye, who blinked slowly, trying to recollect. Chiamaka, he replied Obioma, who reminded him of the new girl at the gym, the one he yelled at angrily, calling her disgusting and filthy for mistakenly staining the gym chair with her menstrual blood. Chiamaka ran out of the gym ashamed as Okoye mocked and ridiculed her in front of everyone present. She never came to the gym again, and no one ever heard from her. Okoye did everything to find her, but no one knew where she lived. He spent hours searching online and finally saw her profile, which had her phone number written on it. So Okoye called the phone number, and her mother picked, directing him to their home. Hours later, he arrived at the house with his friend Obioma and introduced himself to her mother, asking to see Chiamaka. Okoye was so desperate to seek her forgiveness, so he explained the entire ordeal to her mother, who told them to come with her. They walked with her for a few minutes and arrived at a small house at the end of the street. Beside it was the gravesite where Chiamaka was buried. Her mother revealed to them that her daughter returned home from the gym one evening in tears. She locked herself in her room, sobbing uncontrollably, and no one in the family was able to get through to her. They knocked and pleaded, but Chiamaka said these words over and over again. He humiliated me. He made me feel like I am not human. That man will suffer what I've suffered for the past 5 years. Chiamaka said this repeatedly until she finally killed herself in her room. Everyone thought she was sleeping, not knowing that she had committed suicide. Her mother was so livid to realize that Okoye was the one responsible for her daughter's death. What was even more painful was the fact that her daughter for the past 5 years suffered from the issue of blood. She bled continuously for 5 years and no doctor had been able to stop it. She was in and out of hospitals and had missed school, party, opportunities, even love because of her condition. She lived in pain, shame and silence, her mother said, voice trembling with fury. And the one day she stepped out to find strength, to feel normal, you turned her into a joke. Okoye collapsed at the foot of Chiamaka's grave, tears bursting from his eyes as he clutched at the soft earth, crying so hard that his chest shook. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know, he wept. I was ignorant, wicked, blind. I thought I was strong because I did not bleed, but I was just heartless. He placed both arms flat on her gravestone and whispered, Chiamaka, I'm sorry. From the deepest part of my broken soul, I am so sorry. The wind blew gently through the trees, rustling the flowers planted beside her grave. For a moment, it felt like the whole world had paused, watching, listening. Okoye looked up at her mother, his voice barely audible. Will she ever forgive me? He asked. Her mother stood silent, her eyes scanning the trembling man before her. Then she said, forgiveness is not mine to give. It belongs to her soul. But if her death can teach you to change, if her pain can help another girl live without shame, then maybe, just maybe, her spirit will rest. She turned and walked away, leaving Okoye still kneeling at the grave. That night, for the first time in over 1 month, the bleeding slowed. By morning, it had stopped completely, and Okoye, although weak, was so grateful to still be alive. He not only saw that women were strong, he experienced firsthand the physical and emotional weight they carried, and how cruel the world could be to women simply for existing in their bodies. So Okoye learned his lessons the hard way and spent the remaining days of his life regretting his actions, which sent an innocent girl to her early grave. He also began to pamper his wife and all the women around him. Okoye did not wait for his wife's monthly cycle to spoil her silly. He did so, regardless of if she was on her period or not, and his wife Nenye lived the remaining of her life a happy woman. The lesson to be learned from this story is that empathy is the greatest form of strength. True power does not come from muscles or ego, but from understanding and respecting the pain others carry, especially the silent struggle we may never fully comprehend. Okoye mocked what he did not understand, but life humbled him in the most painful way. Through his suffering, he finally realized that a woman's body is not weak, it is miraculous, and the pain women endure, especially during their periods, is not something to belittle but to honor. Let this story remind us to treat one another with kindness, to never mock what we haven't lived, and to uplift instead of shame. Because sometimes life teaches hardest through the very pain we once dismissed. I hope you enjoyed the story.